In today's digital world, that invitation often comes with a small yet meaningful action. Subscribe. By doing so, you allow us to continue bringing you profound storytelling experiences, incredible journeys, and mysteries waiting to be uncovered. So, if you're ready to confront the darkness, to follow every step of terror and the relentless pursuit of justice, then please hit that subscribe button now. Join me as we open the door to a story that will haunt you and keep your eyes glued to the screen. Now then, let's begin. The rain was a constant companion in Port Crest, Oregon, a city perpetually shrouded in a veil of mist and the scent of damp earth. It clung to the old brick buildings, glistened on the slick cobblestone streets of the waterfront district, and seemed to seep into the very bones of its inhabitants. It was the kind of rain that didn't just fall. It whispered, a soft, incessant murmur against windows and pavement. And on the night the first body was found, the rain seemed to hold its breath, replaced by an eerie, profound silence that would soon be shattered by a collective scream of terror. Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose face carried the topography of 2 decades on the forced deep-set lines around eyes that had seen too much, a permanent furrow etched between his brows, stood hunched under the inadequate shelter of a yellow tarp. The crime scene, a small, overgrown patch of urban woodland bordering a sprawling university campus, was a chaotic ballet of flashing blue and red lights against the inky blackness of the pre-dawn hours. Forensics teams, their faces grim and efficient, moved like specters through the drizzle, their high-powered lamps cutting through the gloom, illuminating the horror at their feet. Corbin, Detective Alara Vance, his younger, sharper partner, called out, her voice tight, a rare tremor beneath her usual composure. Vance was all clean lines and coiled energy, her mind a steel trap, her ambition tempered by a fierce sense of justice. She had a way of seeing patterns where others saw only chaos, a trait Corbin respected, even relied upon. He pushed off the slick bark of an ancient oak, its branches skeletal against the gray sky, and moved towards her. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood, the damp earthiness of the forest floor, and something else, a faint, almost floral scent that seemed out of place. "What's the word, Alara?" His voice was a gravelly rumble, a sound that usually cut through tension, but tonight it felt heavy, burdened. Vance gestured towards the roped-off area. Female, Caucasian, Eleanor Vance, 22, registered at Port Crest University. Reported missing by her roommate late last night after she didn't return from a study group. Family's already been notified. Not pretty, Miles. Corbin nodded, bracing himself. He'd seen not pretty before. He'd seen the worst of humanity, twisted into grotesque shapes. But as he stepped closer, the scene before him still managed to tighten a cold knot in his stomach. Eleanor Vance lay on a bed of carefully arranged autumn leaves, her body unervingly pristine save for the stark, crimson starburst staining the front of her white sweater. Her eyes were open, staring up at the perpetually weeping sky, and a single, intricately carved wooden raven, no bigger than his thumb, rested gently on her closed lips. It looked as if it had been placed there with an almost delicate reverence. "Cause of death?" Corbin asked, his gaze sweeping over the scene, trying to absorb every detail. The absence of struggle was chilling. No torn clothing, no signs of a fight. Just this single stab wound to the heart, Vance replied, consulting her notepad. Clean, precise. Dr. Chun believes it was likely instantaneous. No defensive wounds. No signs of sexual assault, at least not externally. Possessions intact, minus her phone. Wallet, keys, backpack all here. Corbin knelt, careful not to disturb anything, his eyes lingering on the small wooden bird. Ravens were common in Port Crest, their mournful caws often echoing through the mist. But this one was different. It wasn't a toy, not a trinket. It was a work of art, with tiny, detailed feathers and sharp, intelligent eyes carved from dark wood. It seemed to watch him. "The bird," he murmured, his breath fogging in the cold. "Unusual." "Indeed," Vance agreed, her gaze equally fixated on the morbid ornament. Chun thinks it was placed there post-mortem. A signature, perhaps. The word hung in the air, heavy and ominous. A signature. The chilling hallmark of a killer who wasn't just taking a life, but making a statement. This wasn't a crime of passion, not a robbery gone wrong. This was calculated, deliberate. The lead forensic technician, a meticulous woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, approached them, her face pale under the harsh lights. Detectives were finding very little. No footprints apart from ours and the victims. No foreign fibers. No signs of struggle as you've observed. The ground around her has been swept, almost pristine. It's like she just lay down and died. Even the leaves are arranged, almost carefully. Corbin exchanged a look with Vance. Swept. Yes, almost. Staged. As if someone went to great lengths to ensure no trace was left behind. Or if there was, it was removed. This killer is good. Very good. Sharma shivered, despite her thick gloves. And the bird has been wiped clean of prints. No DNA on it, either. Nothing on the victim's body that isn't hers or from natural contact. It's a ghost's work. A ghost. The phrase resonated with Corbin. An invisible killer, leaving behind only death and an enigmatic symbol. He felt the familiar weight of a new, complex case settle onto his shoulders. This wasn't going to be easy. The next few days were a blur of intense, frustrating activity. The Port Crest Police Department swarmed with activity, but leads were scarce. Eleanor Vance had been a model student, well-liked, no known enemies, no dark secrets. Her roommate, a tearful girl named Chloe, could offer little more than the fact that Eleanor had been heading to the library for a late-night study session. No one saw her leave the library, no one saw her in the park. She had simply vanished, only to reappear as a macabre tableau. The media, of course, descended like vultures. Port Crest terrorized by silent killer, screamed the headlines. University student murdered in grisly display. The city, usually so sedate, was gripped by a palpable fear. University students were told to walk in groups, curfews were informally established, and the whispers about a lurking shadow in the rain-slicked streets grew louder with each passing hour. Corbin and Vance interviewed dozens of people. Eleanor's professors, her friends, campus security, even local homeless individuals who frequented the park. Nothing. Zero. It was as if the killer had materialized from the mist, committed the act, and dissolved back into the humid air. It's the precision that bothers me, Vance confessed one evening, slumped at her desk, a cold cup of coffee forgotten beside a stack of victimology reports. The fluorescent lights of the bullpen hummed, casting a sickly yellow glow on the weary faces of the detectives. Most killers leave something, a mistake, a thread, something. This one left a piece of art, perfectly placed, perfectly clean, and nothing else. Corbin, staring at the corkboard covered with photographs of Eleanor Vance, both alive and dead, nodded slowly. It speaks of control, someone who plans meticulously, who enjoys the process, perhaps, and who wants to send a message. But what message, Elara? Why the raven? Ravens are symbols of wisdom, mystery, death. Vance mused, tapping her pen against her chin. Messengers between worlds, or, in some folklore, bringers of ill omens. They're also highly intelligent. Maybe the killer identifies with that. A sudden chime from Corbin's desk phone cut through the quiet. He picked it up, his face hardening as he listened. Understood. We're on our way. He hung up, his eyes meeting Vance's. Another one. Same signature. Parkside District, near the old botanical gardens. A collective gasp went through the bullpen. 2 weeks. That's all it had taken for the phantom to strike again. The city's fear morphed into outright panic. The second victim was Marcus Thorne, a 30-year-old freelance graphic designer, found in a secluded gazebo within the sprawling, verdant expanse of the botanical gardens. The scene was eerily similar. No struggle, a single precise stab wound to the heart, and resting on his lips, another exquisitely carved wooden raven. This one was slightly larger, its eyes appearing even more piercing, almost alive. No sexual assault again, Dr. Chun reported, her voice hushed with grim awe, and the body was staged in the same manner, laid out almost reverently, like a macabre offering. The rain has washed away any potential footprints, but Sharma's team is using every trick in the book. Still, it's a wasteland of evidence. Nothing. Corbin ran a gloved hand over his tired face. 2 victims. 2 ravens. 2 perfect, silent murders. Any connection between Eleanor Vance and Marcus Thorne? Vance shook her head, her iPad screen glowing with a rapid cross-referencing search. None that we can find. Completely different circles. Eleanor was a university student, just starting out. Marcus was a bit older, lived alone, worked from home, frequented coffee shops and art galleries. No mutual friends, no shared clubs, no online interactions. He didn't even live in the same part of the city as Eleanor. No obvious link means either a very clever killer making it seem random, or a killer with a highly specific, perhaps symbolic, target profile we haven't identified yet, Corbin observed. He stared at the new raven, its dark wood gleaming faintly in the artificial light. This one feels bolder, more pronounced. It's an escalation, Vance confirmed. And the message feels like it's becoming clearer or at least more insistent. The silence, the staging. It's all about control, about making a statement that transcends the act of murder itself. The public reaction was immediate and ferocious. News channels ran constant updates. Talk radio hosts screamed about the lack of progress. Local politicians, including Mayor Thompson, a man known more for his bland pronouncements than his leadership, held press conferences promising every resource would be dedicated to finding the Port Crest Raven. The name stuck, whispered in hushed tones, written in bold letters. The city, once proud of its progressive, artistic spirit, now felt a cold hand grip its heart. People started looking over their shoulders, avoiding parks after dark, double-checking their locks. A deep, primal fear settled in. Corbin and Vance, along with a task force cobbled together from various departments, worked 18-hour days. They delved into the victims' lives with forensic precision, scrutinizing their digital footprints, interviewing anyone who had even a passing acquaintance with either Eleanor or Marcus. They built timelines, mapped out movements, analyzed traffic camera footage, but the killer remained elusive, a ghost in the machine. "We need a profile," Vance declared during a particularly fruitless briefing. "Someone with a deep understanding of psychology. Because this isn't just about taking lives. It's about something else. The ritual. The symbols. This isn't random violence. It's deliberate, targeted. But we don't know why." Corbin agreed. The lack of a clear motive, combined with the killer's meticulousness, pointed to a disturbed but highly intelligent individual. They requested assistance from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, a move that pleased the mayor and, perhaps, offered a glimmer of hope. Days bled into nights. The rain continued its ceaseless patter, a monotonous rhythm that underscored the tension in the city. Corbin found himself drinking more coffee than ever, his sleep fractured by images of those open, lifeless eyes and the tiny, watching ravens. He felt the familiar weight of responsibility, the crushing burden of a killer at large. He thought of his own daughter, grown and living in another city, and a chill that had nothing to do with the Port Crest weather snaked down his spine. Vance, too, was showing the strain. Her usual crisp professionalism was still there, but her eyes were often shadowed, and a tremor would occasionally betray her composure when she spoke of the victims. She took every dead end personally, every failure to find a lead as a personal defeat. One evening, staring at the composite sketch of the first raven, Corbin noticed something he hadn't before. He called Vance over. "Look closely at the carving, Elara. The detail, the feather patterns. It's almost three-dimensional, like it's in motion." Vance leaned in, her brow furrowed. "It's impressive craftsmanship, for sure. Whoever made this is skilled." "Exactly," Corbin said, tapping the sketch. "And look at the wood grain. It's very distinct. Do we have any woodworkers in the area? Artisans? Anyone who might create something like this?" They pulled up lists of local craft fairs, art school registries, woodcarving clubs. It was a long shot, but it was something. Something tangible to grasp onto in a sea of nothing. They sent the image to local art and craft guilds, hoping for a lead. A week later, just as hope began to wane, a call came through from an elderly woman named Martha Jenkins, who ran a small, independent craft store near the city market. "Yes, detective, I recognize that carving," her shaky voice said over the phone. "A young man. He used to come in here a few years back. Bought special woods. Very precise. He'd bring in his carvings sometimes, just to show them off. Said he wanted to be an artist, but he was too private, too intense. Never liked selling them. Said they had meaning." Corbin felt a surge of adrenaline, the first real lead. "Did he have a name, Miss Jenkins?" "Oh dear, my memory is not what it used to be. A quiet boy, tall, slender, dark hair, always wore a cap. He used to sit in the back just watching the market activity. Said he liked to observe. He had a unique name, something unusual. Nathaniel? No, Nicholas. Wait, I think it was Silas. Silas Thorne. Yes, Silas Thorne." Corbin's breath hitched. Thorne. Marcus Thorne was the second victim. Was it a coincidence? Or a sick, twisted joke? "Are you sure about that name, Miss Jenkins?" "As sure as I can be, dear. Silas Thorne. And he made these birds. Said they were his silent observers. He said a lot of strange things. He stopped coming in about a year ago. Just vanished." Corbin hung up, his mind racing. Silas Thorne. The name reverberated in the quiet of the office. He looked at Vance, who had been listening intently. "Silas Thorne," he repeated, testing the sound. Could be a relative of Marcus Thorne. A brother? A cousin? Vance was already on her computer, typing furiously. Marcus Thorne's family tree. No immediate brothers or cousins named Silas. He had an estranged uncle, Robert Thorne, who lived in California, but no children listed for him. His parents died in a car crash 10 years ago. Only child. No Silas. A dead end. Or a deliberate misdirection. The killer was toying with them. He was using a name that was almost, but not quite, right. The frustration was a bitter taste in Corbin's mouth. They had a lead on the maker of the Ravens, but not the killer. Was Silas Thorne the killer, and he chose Marcus because of the shared surname, perhaps as a twisted personal insult? Or was Silas Thorne a completely different individual, somehow linked to the victims in a way they couldn't yet fathom? As the rain outside began to pick up its tempo, a new, chilling thought solidified in Corbin's mind. The meticulousness, the lack of evidence, the symbolic ravens, the staged bodies. This wasn't just a killer. This was an artist of death, a puppet master pulling the strings of fear. And the stage was Port Crest itself. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again. A text message. Not from the precinct. From an unknown number. He opened it, his heart hammering against his ribs. It was a picture. A grainy, poorly lit photograph of a third carved raven. But this one wasn't on a victim. This one was perched on a familiar windowsill. The window of the Port Crest Police Department, overlooking the rain-slicked street. Beneath the image, a single line of text. "The silent will sing." Corbin stared at the message, the blood draining from his face. The killer wasn't just observing from afar. He was here. He was inside their world, mocking them, challenging them. The whispered fear of the city had just found its voice. A chilling, silent promise of more to come. The whispering wraith was not just a name. It was a terrifying, omnipresent reality. The cryptic message, a digital taunt perched on the very edifice of justice, sent a tremor through the Port Crest Police Department that even the relentless rain couldn't dampen. The photo of the raven on the precinct windowsill was more than a threat. It was a declaration of war. It meant the killer had been close, intimate with their despair, perhaps even walking among them, cloaked in the ordinary. Every available officer, check the perimeter, check the roof access, check every damn camera within a 5-block radius. Chief Miller's voice, usually calm and measured, cracked with a mix of fury and fear. The immediate sweep yielded nothing. No fresh footprints on the wet pavement outside. No anomalous figures on surveillance. The raven had simply appeared, a phantom's touch, then vanished. "The silent will sing," Vance read aloud from her tablet, the text message displayed prominently. "It's a direct response to our own internal discussions, Miles. We talked about the victims being silent, how the killer seemed to appreciate their stillness. He's listening. He's watching us." Corbin nodded grimly, pacing their cramped office. The air felt charged, thick with the killer's unseen presence. "He's reveling in the attention, playing a game, and we're the pieces." He slammed his fist softly on the desk. "Who is Silas Thorne? Is he our man, or is he a ghost from the killer's past? The shared surname with Marcus Thorne. It can't be a coincidence." Their lead from Martha Jenkins, the elderly craft store owner, had ignited a frantic search. They dug into public records, old-school yearbooks, social media archives, chasing every Silas Thorne in the region, looking for one who matched the vague description. They found a handful, but none fit perfectly, and none had any discernible connection to either Eleanor Vance or Marcus Thorne, or to the specific, haunting craftsmanship of the Ravens. The name felt like a deliberate breadcrumb, leading them into a labyrinth. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit responded quickly, sending Special Agent Dr. Evelyn Reed. Reed was everything Corbin and Vance were not: precise, intellectual, almost academic in her approach. Mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail, she carried an air of quiet authority. She arrived within 24 hours of the Raven message, a briefcase in one hand, a serene but determined expression on her face. "Detectives Corbin, Vance," she greeted, her voice calm, clear, completely unfazed by the palpable tension in the bullpen. "Agent Reed, I've reviewed the case files on the flight over. The meticulousness, the signature, the lack of forensic evidence. This is a deeply intelligent and highly controlled individual. And the recent taunt, it suggests escalating narcissism and a desire for engagement." Corbin, skeptical of profilers by nature but desperate for any advantage, gestured towards the corkboard. "We're all ears, Agent. What do you see that we're missing?" Reed spent the next few hours in silence, absorbing. She walked the crime scenes, poring over photos, medical examiner reports, witness statements. She sat in front of the victims' photos, her gaze unwavering, as if trying to read their souls. Vance, ever observant, noticed the way Reed meticulously arranged data, cross-referencing minute details that others might dismiss as irrelevant. "The Raven," Reed finally began, addressing them in the quiet of a conference room. "It's not just a symbol of death. It's also associated with prophecy, secrets, and sometimes a guide for lost souls. More importantly, it's a carrion bird. It feeds on the dead, but it also cleanses. This killer sees themselves as a purveyor of a twisted form of justice or cleansing." She paused, looking from Corbin to Vance. "The victims, Eleanor Vance, an aspiring academic, a student of knowledge. Marcus Thorne, a graphic designer, a creator of visual narratives. They both represent a form of communication, a way of expressing thoughts, ideas, stories. Yet, they were found in settings associated with quiet contemplation and natural beauty: the park, the botanical garden. Their deaths were silent, precise, and the ravens were placed on their lips, silencing them further." Vance's eyes widened. The killer silenced their voices, and the note, "The silent will sing." He's saying he's giving them a voice, in his own twisted way. Or he's forcing the city to listen to his voice through their silence. Reed nodded approvingly. "Precisely. Our unknown subject is likely an individual who feels unheard, unseen, or believes others have been silenced. He's taking control of the narrative, using these victims as his grim messengers. He is intelligent, likely organized, probably socially awkward or isolated, but highly functional. He has a meticulous nature, a compulsion for order, and a profound sense of grievance." "Grievance about what?" Corbin pressed, seeing a flicker of light in the darkness. "That's the core question. Reed replied, her gaze distant, as if sifting through unseen patterns. It could be personal, a past trauma or injustice he suffered or witnessed. Or it could be something broader, a perceived societal ill. The choice of victims, initially seemingly random, could be symbolic targets not directly linked to him but to his grievance. The profile was chillingly specific yet frustratingly vague. It painted a picture of a ghost, a deeply damaged individual operating with a perverse sense of purpose. Just as the task force began to digest Reed's insights, a new wave of terror struck. 3 weeks after Marcus Thorne's murder, and just a few days after the Raven message, the city woke up to the news of a third victim. This time, the location was more public, more audacious. The body was found on the steps of the Port Crest Public Library, nestled amongst the towering columns. Sarah Jennings, a 50-year-old librarian, known for her quiet demeanor and love of obscure poetry. She was found at dawn by a jogger, meticulously arranged, a single stab wound, and on her lips, a third wooden raven, this one with its wings spread, as if taking flight. The city exploded. Media vans swarmed the library. Citizens held impromptu vigils. Fear spiraled into full-blown hysteria. Schools closed. Businesses reported a sharp drop in customers. Mayor Thompson, visibly shaken, declared a state of emergency. A librarian, Vance stated, her voice hoarse, as they stood over the latest crime scene, a grim tableau under the dawn sky. Someone who curates stories, who guards knowledge. And the library, a place where stories are told and preserved. And the raven has its wings spread, Corbin added, his gaze fixed on the carving. Taking flight, disseminating the message. He's getting bolder, more confident. Dr. Sharma, her face etched with exhaustion, approached them. Again, detectives, barely anything. He's a phantom. He must be using the cover of darkness and the relentless rain. The only thing we found, wedged deep in the victim's pocket, was this. She held up a small, folded piece of paper, carefully sealed in an evidence bag. Corbin took it, his gloved fingers trembling slightly. It was old, yellowed parchment. Inside, neatly typed, was a short, chilling verse. In silence they fell, their truths unsaid, while shadows grew where light once led. Now ravens bear their silent plea, for hidden wrongs, for all to see. The unheard cries, a haunting strain, shall echo loud through falling rain. A poem, Vance whispered, her eyes wide with a dawning realization. He's not just a killer, he's a poet. This is his manifesto. This is his voice. Reed, who had been observing from a distance, stepped forward, her expression grim. This confirms the profile. He sees himself as an agent of revelation, someone exposing hidden wrongs. And the victims, they represent silence. Eleanor Vance, studying in a quiet library. Marcus Thorne, a visual artist using images more than words. Sarah Jennings, a librarian, surrounded by books that hold untold stories, yet a quiet woman herself. The killer is targeting those who, in his mind, embody silence, or who are connected to the dissemination of information he perceives as incomplete or false. The poem sparked a new direction. They brought in linguistic experts, literary scholars, hoping to trace the style, the phrasing, the cadence to any known works or authors. Nothing. It was original or at least skillfully disguised. The task force now had 2 major avenues of investigation. The identity of Silas Thorne, the potential raven carver, and the deeper meaning of the killer's grievance as suggested by Reed, and now reinforced by the poem. Vance found a small, almost forgotten online forum for independent woodcarvers and artisans. She painstakingly cross-referenced the unique style of the ravens, finally finding a few similar pieces posted anonymously years ago. The poster's handle was Corvus Silens, Latin for silent raven. The location tag was removed, but old comments hinted at a Port Crest origin. The comments also spoke of the artist's intense passion for wood, their reclusive nature, and their often dark, philosophical musings about truth and unseen narratives. Corvus Silens, Vance breathed, her finger tracing the screen. This has to be our guy. Or at least the craftsman of the Ravens. She started digging into the forum's archives, looking for any personal information, any slip-up. She found old conversations where Corvus Silence mentioned a personal tragedy, a great injustice that had shaped his art. He spoke of betrayal, of hidden truths, of the complicity of silence. Meanwhile, Reed and Corbin focused on the hidden wrongs alluded to in the poem. They delved into Port Crest's history. Old cold cases, political scandals, environmental disasters, major corporate cover-ups. Anything that could be construed as a silent wrong. The list was long, depressing, and overwhelming. The cold case angle is strong, Reed theorized during a late-night session. Often, individuals with this type of grievance will target people they perceive as having some connection, however remote, to the original injustice. They might represent a facet of the problem, or a symbol of the system that allowed it to occur. Corbin thought back to the name Silas Thorne. Could the name be a clue to the original wrong? What if the Silas Thorne that Ms. Jenkins mentioned was not the killer, but a victim of the hidden wrong? A frantic search through old missing persons reports and unsolved cases finally yielded a chilling possibility. 15 years ago, a young man named Silas Thorne, a promising, idealistic journalism student at Port Crest University, had vanished without a trace. His disappearance, initially classified as a runaway, later became a cold case. He had been investigating a complex story about alleged corruption within a prominent Port Crest real estate development firm, spearheaded by a wealthy, influential family, the Prestons, and rumored complicity from certain city officials. His disappearance was largely forgotten, swallowed by the city's busy life, and the case was closed after years of no leads. Corbin felt a shiver of recognition. Silas Thorne, the journalist. He was trying to expose a truth, but he was silenced. Vance's face was pale, and Eleanor Vance, the first victim, was a student at Port Crest University. Marcus Thorne, a visual artist, creator of narratives, shared the surname. Sarah Jennings, the librarian, a curator of knowledge, found at the library, a temple of information. Reed's eyes gleamed with intense focus. The pieces are beginning to fit. Our unsub isn't just reacting to a general sense of injustice. He's avenging a specific, forgotten wrong. The disappearance of Silas Thorne. He sees himself as Silas's voice, the one to finally make the silence sing. The implications were staggering. If the killer was avenging Silas Thorne, then he either was Silas Thorne, having returned after years of being presumed dead, or he was someone deeply connected to Silas, someone who believed in his cause, someone who nurtured that grievance for 15 years. Who was involved in that Preston development case? Corbin asked, his mind racing through the possibilities. Who would have benefited from Silas Thorne's silence? They pulled the dusty, ancient files on Silas Thorne's disappearance. The investigation had been minimal, almost intentionally so. A few police reports, interviews with his distraught parents, a perfunctory search. It reeked of a cover-up. The names that emerged were a who's who of Port Crest's elite. William Preston, the patriarch of the development firm, Councilman Arthur Finch, who pushed the project through, and a few other prominent citizens who had invested heavily. The pressure mounted. The city was on edge, a collective gasp waiting for the next strike. Corbin, Vance, and Reed now had a motive, a direction, and a terrifyingly clear picture of their foe's twisted mind. They knew why he was killing and who he was avenging. Now they just needed to find him. As Corbin looked at the old, faded photo of Silas Thorne, a young man with bright, earnest eyes, clutching a reporter's notebook, he felt a profound sense of melancholy. A life cut short, a truth buried. And now, a vengeful spirit or an avenger had risen from the ashes of that injustice, bringing a terrifying reckoning to Port Crest. The rain outside intensified, drumming a relentless, chilling rhythm against the precinct windows. Sounded less like whispers now, and more like a roar. The city's silent scream was finally echoing, loud and clear, and the whispering wraith was just getting started. The revelation of Silas Thorne's cold case cast a long, chilling shadow over Port Crest. The puzzle pieces, once scattered and seemingly disparate, were now snapping into place with terrifying precision. The killer wasn't just a random monster. He was a meticulous, vengeful executioner, operating with a profound, deeply personal sense of justice. The hidden wrongs of 15 years ago were finally resurfacing, brought to light by a series of gruesome murders. He's targeting the architects of Silas Thorne's silence, or those he perceives as complicit in the cover-up, Agent Reed explained, her voice sharp and urgent. Her initial profile of a deeply aggrieved, intelligent individual now felt acutely accurate. The victims thus far, the student, the artist, the librarian, they represent the suppression of truth, the silencing of voices. Now, he's likely to move to those he holds directly responsible. Corbin and Vance, invigorated by this breakthrough yet burdened by its grim implications, returned to the aged files of the Silas Thorne disappearance. The original investigation, already suspicious in its brevity, now seemed like a deliberate whitewash. Key players emerged: William Preston, the ruthless real estate magnate whose controversial development Silas was investigating; Arthur Finch, a city councilman who fast-tracked the project; and a retired police captain, Thomas Blackwood, who was in charge of the initial, perfunctory search for Silas. "These are his likely next targets," Vance stated, tapping the mugshots of the three men displayed on the screen. "The people who silenced Silas. The ones whose voices he now wants to make sing." The task force shifted gears, their focus laser-sharp. They put Preston, Finch, and Blackwood under round-the-clock surveillance, deploying every available officer. The stakes were impossibly high. The killer had already proven his ability to bypass security, to vanish without a trace. William Preston, a man in his late 70s, still held considerable sway in Port Crest. He lived in a sprawling mansion overlooking the bay, protected by high walls and a sophisticated security system. Arthur Finch, now a semi-retired lobbyist, frequented exclusive clubs and golf courses. Thomas Blackwood lived a quiet life in a suburban home, battling early-onset dementia. Protecting them felt like trying to hold smoke. "We need to find out who our Corvus Silence is," Corbin insisted. "Is he Silas himself, returned from the grave? Or someone else, a friend, family, a fellow student from back then, who believed Silas's cause?" Vance, a digital bloodhound, delved deeper into the online persona of Corvus Silence. She found a fragmented digital trail leading to an old, defunct email address registered to a Samuel Thorne, Silas's older brother, who had been profoundly affected by his brother's disappearance, eventually leaving Port Crest for years after the case went cold. Samuel had been a talented woodcarver in his youth, a skill he shared with Silas. "Samuel Thorne," Vance announced, her voice filled with a grim triumph. "He matches the description Martha Jenkins gave us. The quiet intensity, the dark hair, the artistic bent. He left Port Crest shortly after Silas vanished. He'd be in his late 30s now, and he shared Silas's passion for justice, according to old university newspaper articles. He believed the police covered it up." A frantic search for Samuel Thorne's current whereabouts began. He had lived off the grid for years, moving frequently, taking odd jobs, but a recent property tax record placed him back in Port Crest. A small, secluded cabin nestled deep in the coastal forest, far from the city's watchful eyes. A perfect hideout for a meticulous killer. "That's our unsub," Reed confirmed, her voice devoid of emotion, purely analytical. The grief, the injustice, the shared artistic talent, the history of reclusion, the return to the city where it all happened. He's taking revenge for his brother, becoming the voice Silas never had. The city was a tinderbox. The media, having gotten wind of the Silas Thorne connection, fueled the frenzy. Citizens demanded answers, accountability, and justice for Silas, and for the victims of the Whispering Wraith. Mayor Thompson's office was overwhelmed, and Chief Miller found himself under unprecedented pressure. The surveillance on Preston, Finch, and Blackwood was tightened, but Samuel Thorne was always one step ahead. The call came in the dead of night, shattering the fragile peace. Arthur Finch's security detail reported a breach. By the time Corbin, Vance, and Reed arrived, it was too late. Finch's sprawling penthouse apartment was in disarray, but Finch himself was gone. A single, intricately carved wooden raven sat on his mahogany desk, its wings still, its eyes seeming to mock their failure. "He didn't kill him here," Vance observed, her flashlight sweeping the room. "He abducted him." "Why?" "He wants to make a spectacle," Reed deduced, her gaze fixed on the empty space where Finch had been. "He wants to force them, or us, to finally acknowledge the hidden wrongs. He's escalating to a public display of judgment." A frantic search for Arthur Finch began, but Samuel Thorne had vanished with his captive, leaving no trace. The city held its breath, knowing the next move would be gruesome, public, and definitive. Corbin felt the familiar knot of dread tighten in his stomach. He remembered the poem, "For hidden wrongs, for all to see, the unheard cries, a haunting strain, shall echo loud through falling rain." This was it, the climax of Samuel Thorne's twisted revenge. Hours later, an anonymous tip, routed through a complex series of encrypted servers, arrived at the precinct. A single line, chilling in its simplicity. "The old clock tower. Midnight. The silent will sing." The Port Crest Clock Tower was an iconic landmark, a century-old edifice rising majestically in the heart of the city's historic district. It had a large, open belfry, visible from almost anywhere downtown, a perfect stage for a public reckoning. Corbin immediately understood. Samuel Thorne wasn't just killing, he was holding a trial, a public execution to reveal the hidden wrongs for all to see. A tactical team was assembled, led by Corbin and Vance, with Reed providing critical psychological analysis. The plan was to surround the clock tower, establish a perimeter, and negotiate. But deep down, Corbin knew Samuel wasn't interested in negotiation. As midnight approached, the city square surrounding the clock tower was eerily deserted, cordoned off by police barricades. The rain, a constant companion throughout this nightmare, began to fall harder, drumming on the asphalt, blurring the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles. Through the rain-streaked windows of a nearby building, Corbin saw it. A figure, dark and slender, standing in the belfry of the clock tower, and beside him, bound and gagged, was Arthur Finch. Samuel Thorne, illuminated by the searchlights, appeared to be wearing a long, dark trench coat, his face obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. In his hand, he held a megaphone. "People of Port Crest." His voice, amplified and distorted, echoed eerily through the rain-swept square, reverberating off the surrounding buildings. "For 15 years, this city has lived a lie. For 15 years, the truth of Silas Thorne was buried, his voice silenced. You allowed it. You forgot him." Corbin listened, his heart pounding. Samuel was unhinged, but also terrifyingly rational in his madness. "Arthur Finch, William Preston, Thomas Blackwood." Samuel's voice rose, filled with a raw, vengeful fury. "You conspired to silence my brother, to bury his truth for your greed. And the police, led by Captain Blackwood, turned a blind eye. They left him in the dark. Now, I bring the darkness to you." He then began to recite, word for word, excerpts from Silas Thorne's original investigative notes, details of illicit land deals, forged documents, bribes, and the ruthless tactics used to push through the Preston development. He accused Finch of taking bribes, Preston of coercion, and Blackwood of orchestrating the cover-up of Silas's disappearance, likely implying Silas was eliminated to prevent him from exposing the truth. The truth, raw and ugly, echoed through the square, picked up by news crews positioned just beyond the perimeter. The city was finally hearing what it had long suspected. "Samuel!" Corbin's voice boomed through his own megaphone, cutting through the rain. "This isn't the way. You've made your point. Let Finch go. We can talk." Samuel Thorne laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that seemed to scrape against the wet night. "Talk? You had 15 years to talk, detective. 15 years to find my brother. 15 years to acknowledge the truth. But you stayed silent, like the rest of them." He pulled a small, dark object from his coat pocket. It was the largest, most intricately carved raven yet, its wings fully spread, its eyes gleaming with an almost demonic intensity. He held it up, a macabre trophy against the port crest sky. "This is not an execution, Detective," Samuel proclaimed, his voice imbued with a chilling finality. "This is a revelation, a cleansing, and the last of the silent will finally sing." As he spoke, he moved towards Arthur Finch, who was whimpering, fear distorting his features. "Sniper team, be ready," Corbin yelled into his comms, his heart in his throat. "On my mark." But Samuel Thorne was faster. With a horrifying surge of strength, he pushed Arthur Finch to the edge of the belfry, then over. A collective gasp ripped through the city square. The sound of Finch's body hitting the cobblestones below was sickening, even from a distance, muffled by the rain. "No!" Corbin screamed, his voice raw. Samuel Thorne stood at the edge, silhouetted against the dark sky, the raven still held aloft in his hand. He then looked down at the tactical teams, at Corbin, at the silent, horrified city. He didn't try to escape. He simply brought the wooden raven to his own lips, mimicking the pose of his victims. Then, with a sudden, decisive motion, he plunged a hidden blade, the very instrument of his revenge, deep into his own heart. The entire scene unfolded in mere seconds, a horrifying poetic climax to a decade and a half of simmering rage. The tactical team swarmed the clock tower, but it was over. Samuel Thorne lay dead, the last raven clutched in his hand, a final, defiant testament to his grim mission. Arthur Finch was gone, and the truth, brutal and undeniable, finally laid bare. The aftermath was a whirlwind. The city was in shock. The mayor ordered a full, independent inquiry into the Silas Thorne cold case, and the damning evidence Samuel had broadcast was corroborated by the documents found in his cabin, years of meticulous research, copies of original files, and a harrowing journal detailing his descent into vengeful madness. William Preston and Thomas Blackwood were arrested within hours, facing a litany of charges for corruption and obstruction of justice. The Port Crest Police Department faced its own internal reckoning. Corbin, Vance, and Reed sat in the quiet of their office days later, the rain still falling, but the tension had finally receded, replaced by a profound exhaustion. The whispering wraith had been unveiled, his vengeance exacted, his voice silenced by his own hand. "He got his justice," Vance murmured, staring at the newspaper headline. "The Raven's Reckoning. City elite arrested after clock tower tragedy." "A twisted, brutal form of it," Corbin corrected, rubbing his temples. "At what cost?" "For lives, including his own, and a city forever scarred." Reed, packing her meticulous files, looked at them, her gaze empathetic. He believed he was a messenger, delivering a truth no one else would. His methods were abhorrent, but his grievance was real. Sometimes justice is a messy, tragic thing, and the shadows, they always find a way to surface. Corbin looked out at the perpetually gray Port Crest sky. The rain still fell, whispering its endless secrets. The story of Silas Thorne and his avenging brother, Samuel, would forever be etched into the soul of the city. The whispering wraith had made the silence sing, but the melody was a mournful dirge, a haunting reminder that some truths, once buried, return with a terrible, destructive force. And sometimes, the pursuit of justice, even when justified, can lead to the darkest corners of the human heart. The silence had indeed sung, and its echo would forever resonate in the heart of Port Crest.